There is a particular kind of quiet that settles into a house after 51 years of marriage end. It isn't the quiet of a Sunday morning or the quiet of a library. It's the quiet of a clock that has stopped. Every room holds a version of her Margaret's reading glasses on the nightstand, her cardigan draped over the kitchen chair, the little ceramic rooster she bought at a flea market in Savannah that I always pretended to hate. I never hated it. I just loved watching her defend it. She went on a Tuesday in March. Pancreatic cancer. Swift and merciless. We had 4 months between the diagnosis and the end, and I spent every one of those days sitting beside her, holding her hand, telling her she was going to be fine even when we both knew I was lying. She would squeeze my fingers and say, "Harold, you are the world's worst liar." And I would say, "I know, Maggie, I know." After the funeral, my son Daniel drove me home to the house in Raleigh and walked me through the front door and stood there in the hallway with this look on his face like a man holding a glass he didn't know what to do with. He's a good man, Daniel. Always has been. He has Margaret's eyes, that same particular shade of warm brown that made you feel like you'd known someone your whole life the first time you met them. "Dad," he said, "I don't want you here alone." "I'm fine," I told him. I was not fine. For 3 months, I sat in that house and watched the walls. I forgot to eat lunch most days. I started talking to the ceramic rooster. Not long conversations. In quote, just small things. "Maggie loved you, you ugly little bird." Things like that. My doctor told me I'd lost 11 pounds at my next checkup, and gave me a look that meant more than anything he said out loud. Non. Daniel called every night at 7 o'clock. He'd moved to Charlotte 5 years earlier with his wife, Renee, and their daughter Sophie, who was 7 years old and had recently decided that her life's mission was to collect every variety of sticker known to mankind. They had a good house, a real family house, 3 bedrooms and a yard with a magnolia tree that Sophie had named Gerald. Don't ask me why. She was 7. It was Daniel who finally said it plainly. "Dad, we have a spare room. It's just sitting there. Please come stay with us. At least through the winter. Sophie talks about you every single day." He paused. "I need you close. I need to know you're okay." I held the phone and looked around the kitchen at the ceramic rooster, at Margaret's cardigan, at the silence that had taken up permanent residence in every corner of the house. And I said, "All right, son, all right. I want to be honest with you about something, friend." I walked into my son's house thinking I was going to spend a quiet winter helping with the yard and reading books and watching Sophie add to her sticker empire. I walked in thinking the hardest part of my year was behind me. I had no idea that I was walking straight into something that would make me question whether I would survive to see the spring. The day I arrived was a bright Saturday in November. Daniel carried my bags in, and Sophie launched herself at me from the front steps like a small missile in pigtails, wrapping both arms around my neck and pressing a sticker of a blue dolphin against my cheek before I could say a word. "I saved that one for you, Grandpa," she said seriously. "It's the best one I have. It's the best one I have." Renee met me at the door with a smile that was perfectly polished, the kind of smile that a person practices. "Harold, we're so glad you're here. Come in, come in." She was a careful woman, stylish, organized, the kind of person whose home looks like a magazine even on a Tuesday morning. She'd always been pleasant to me at holidays, always said the right things, but I had never been able to get past the sense that she was performing pleasantness rather than feeling it. And then there was her mother, Beverly. Beverly had moved in with Daniel and Renee about 2 years earlier, after her own husband passed. She was a small woman, bird-like in her movements, with sharp gray eyes that I always felt were cataloging something. She greeted me warmly, both hands clasping mine, with the kind of attentive friendliness that in a different context I might have found touching. "Harold," she said, "Renee talks about you so often. I feel like I already know you. You must be exhausted from the drive. Come sit down." The first night was fine. We had dinner together, all 5 of us, at the dining room table, and Sophie told me at length about Gerald the magnolia tree and the dolphin sticker and a boy at school named Marcus who she found both annoying and fascinating in equal measure. It was the most animated conversation I'd had in months. I went to bed that night, feeling something I hadn't felt since March. Not happiness exactly, something quieter than that. The feeling that maybe there was still a shape to my days. It started on the second evening. I came downstairs to find Beverly already in the kitchen, moving efficiently between the stove and the counter with the ease of a woman in her own home. Renee was nowhere to be seen. Daniel was in the backyard with Sophie. "Sit down, Harold," Beverly said without turning around. "I've got dinner handled." "You don't have to do that," I said. "I'm happy to help, or just fend for myself." "Nonsense." She turned and smiled at me. "You're a guest. Sit." That night she served me pot roast with carrots and mashed potatoes, Margaret's exact Sunday meal down to the rosemary. When I mentioned it, Beverly tilted her head with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Daniel told me what you liked," she said simply. "I just wanted you to feel at home." NDA. NDA. I thought it was kindness. I cannot tell you how much I wish I had thought harder than that. By the third night, it had become a routine. Beverly cooked. Beverly plated my food separately, before everyone else's, and set it in front of me herself. Daniel and Renee and Sophie ate from shared serving dishes at the center of the table, but my plate always came from Beverly's hands, already prepared. I noticed it but dismissed it. She was being thoughtful, I told myself. She was an older Southern woman who showed love through feeding people. Margaret had been the same way. What I could not dismiss, after about a week, was how I felt after dinner. It wasn't dramatic. Nothing that would have alarmed a doctor on its own. A heaviness in my chest, a fogginess behind my eyes, like looking through a window that someone had breathed on. Some nights my hands trembled slightly when I reached for my water glass, and I'd tuck them into my lap before anyone could notice. I started waking at 3 in the morning with my heart beating strangely, not racing but wrong. An irregular, stumbling rhythm that would last an hour and then stop. I told myself I was grieving. I told myself I was 71 years old and had just lost my wife of 51 years and driven to a new city and disrupted every habit my body had built across a lifetime. Of course, I felt unwell. Who wouldn't? I did not tell Daniel. I was very deliberate about not telling Daniel. He had enough to carry. He'd brought me here out of love, and I was not going to repay that by becoming a medical burden, an old man who needed monitoring. I'd spent my whole career, 30 years, as a high school history teacher. The last 12 as department head, teaching teenagers to push through discomfort. I could manage a little fatigue. But the thing about fatigue that comes from poison rather than grief is that it doesn't get better with rest. It accumulates. Each morning I woke up carrying a weight I hadn't gone to sleep with, and by the end of the third week I was gripping the banister with both hands when I came downstairs and taking short breaks on the bench in the hallway that I told anyone who noticed was just me taking in the morning. And always, every evening, Beverly was there, efficient, attentive, watching. I noticed it the way you notice something you don't want to admit you're noticing. She would set my plate down and then find a reason to stay close, refilling my water, asking if the temperature was right, if the seasoning was good. Her eyes would track to my plate with an intensity that sat just outside the range of normal interest. She didn't watch Renee eat. She didn't watch Daniel. End quote. She watched me. And specifically, she watched me in the way that a person watches a car they've parked on a hill, waiting to see if it holds. One Thursday, I pushed through dinner barely touching the food, made some excuse about a late lunch, and I slept better that night than I had in 3 weeks. I woke up and my hands were steady. I sat with that fact for a long time. I want to tell you, friend, that I immediately knew what was happening. I want to tell you I was sharp and decisive and took action. And the truth is, I sat with that fact for 4 days because the alternative was too grotesque to hold in my mind without flinching. This was my son's home. This was his mother-in-law. This was a woman who had made me pot roast and called me by my first name with apparent warmth. The idea that she might be deliberately making me sick required me to believe something so ugly about human nature that I kept finding reasons to disbelieve it. But then I started listening differently. Small things I'd heard and not registered. A conversation Renee and Beverly had in the kitchen one morning, low voices that stopped when I appeared in the doorway. The way Renee had mentioned, casually, twice, that the house was getting difficult to manage with so many people. The way Beverly had asked me once, in that same warm, gentle tone, whether I had a financial advisor, whether I'd sorted everything out after Margaret's passing, whether Daniel knew what the plan was. End quote. I had answered vaguely, and she had smiled and changed the subject, and I had thought nothing of it at the time. I started thinking about it now. Margaret had left a substantial life insurance policy. We'd saved carefully for 40 years. The house in Raleigh was paid off. I was not a wealthy man by any grand measure, but I was comfortable, and I had a will that left everything to Daniel, and Daniel had a wife, and that wife had a mother. I cannot tell you exactly when I stopped telling myself I was wrong. It wasn't a single moment. It was a tide that came in gradually until the ground I was standing on was underwater. What I did next was not dramatic. I didn't confront anyone. I didn't call the police. I did something that a retired history teacher with 30 years of practice separating fact from inference does instinctively. I started gathering evidence. I began eating most of my dinner in my room, telling Beverly I was having trouble with my appetite and preferred smaller portions. I would take my plate upstairs, eat a few bites of what looked safest, and dispose of the rest carefully. I started eating breakfast before anyone else was up, plain oatmeal. I made myself food that came from sealed packages that I kept in my room. Within 5 days, the fogginess began to lift. Within 10 days, I was sleeping through the night. I also started watching Sophie. She was 7, and 7-year-olds are extraordinary observers of the social world because they absorb everything without understanding. They're supposed to pretend they don't see it. I would watch her at dinner, and I would watch where she looked and what her face did. One evening, she was reaching across the table for more rolls when she glanced at Beverly setting down my plate, and something in her small face shifted, a microexpression there and gone, the way a fish breaks the surface of water and disappears again. She looked away quickly. She didn't say anything, but I noted it. 3 days later, it was a rainy Sunday, and Sophie and I were at the kitchen table working on what she called her official sticker organization system, which was both elaborate and deeply logical in a way that I found genuinely impressive. Beverly was in the garden. Daniel and Renee had gone to run errands. Sophie was quiet for a moment, pressing a gold star sticker onto a piece of cardstock with great concentration, and then without looking up she said, "Grandpa, do you like how Grandma Beverly cooks for you?" Something in her voice was careful. That particular care that children apply when they are circling something they don't have the vocabulary for. "She's very kind to do it," I said, watching her. Sophie pressed the sticker down with her thumb, still not looking up. "She cooks yours different," she said. "I saw her one time. She put something in from a little bottle. I thought it was like vitamins or something." She looked up then, and her eyes were serious and searching in the way that children's eyes are when they are trying to understand something that doesn't feel right but that they cannot name. "Does it taste okay?" I looked at my granddaughter, this small, brilliant, sticker-collecting person who had pressed a blue dolphin against my cheek. On the day I arrived, and I understood that I was looking at the reason I was still alive to have this conversation. "Sophie," I said carefully, "can you tell me about the little bottle? What did it look like?" She described it precisely. Dark glass, small, something that lived in Beverly's apron pocket, and was gone again, before anyone else came into the kitchen. That evening I called my doctor in Raleigh from my room with the door closed. I described what I'd experienced, the symptoms, the timeline, the improvement once I'd stopped eating Beverly's food. There was a silence on the other end that told me he was taking it seriously before he said a single word. He told me to come in as soon as I could and to bring any sample of the food if I was able to obtain one safely. He also told me to call the police. I didn't call the police that night. I want to be honest with you about that too. I called Daniel. It was the hardest conversation I have ever had, harder than telling my own children 30 years ago that a classmate of theirs had been killed in a car accident. Harder than anything I'd navigated across a lifetime of delivering difficult truths to young people who weren't ready to hear them. There is no preparation for telling your son that his wife's mother may have been slowly poisoning you at the dinner table in his home. He didn't speak for a very long time after I finished. "Dad." That was all at first. Just my name, in a voice I had never heard from him before. A voice stripped of everything except the effort to stay standing. "I know, son. Are you sure?" "I'm not sure of everything, but I'm sure of enough." And Sophie saw something, Daniel. That's what I keep coming back to. She's 7 years old, and she saw something she couldn't explain, and she came to me with it. Another long silence. Then, "Don't eat anything else in this house that you didn't prepare yourself. Don't say anything to Renee or Beverly. I need one night, Dad. Can you give me one night? N. N. One night. I gave him one night. What Daniel did with that night, I only learned the full extent of later. He went into Beverly's room while she was asleep. He found the bottle in the bottom of her overnight bag, small, dark glass, exactly as Sophie had described it. He photographed everything. He kept a sample. He left everything exactly as it was and came back to bed and lay awake until morning and didn't say a word to his wife. The next morning he drove me to the doctor in Raleigh himself. The blood work came back within 48 hours. Digoxin, a heart medication, at levels that in a man of my age with no diagnosed heart condition would over time cause exactly what I had experienced: fatigue, arrhythmia, cognitive fog, weakness. Not fast enough to be dramatic. Slow enough to look like an old man declining naturally. Slow enough to look like grief. When the police came to the house, it was a Wednesday morning. I was there. Daniel had asked me to be there, and I understood why. And Renee answered the door in her bathrobe, her face going through 4 different expressions in the span of 2 seconds when she saw the uniforms. Beverly appeared at the top of the stairs and stopped halfway down when she saw me standing in the hallway. For a moment we just looked at each other. This small woman who had clasped my hands in welcome and called me by name and made me pot roast and watched me eat it with those careful gray eyes. She didn't say anything to me. She looked at Daniel instead. And I think in that moment she may have been calculating whether there was anything left to say that would help her. There wasn't. She seemed to understand that. Renee was a different story. Renee cried. Renee insisted she hadn't known. I watched Daniel's face while his wife said this, and I watched him decide, very deliberately, what he believed. And I don't think he ever fully resolved it. They arrested Beverly that morning. The charges were serious, aggravated assault, attempted poisoning, and eventually, as the investigation widened, elder financial abuse. It came out in the proceedings that Beverly had done this before, to a different elderly man 2 states away, and that the current charges broke open an investigation that had been stalled for 3 years. Sophie's dolphin sticker, as I thought of it, one small thing, placed at exactly the right moment. The trial came and went. Beverly was convicted and sentenced. Renee moved out of Daniel's house within 6 months. I will leave the details of that between the two of them because it isn't mine to tell, but I will tell you that Daniel handled it with more grace than most men would have. I moved back to Raleigh in the spring, to my own house, to the ceramic rooster and Margaret's cardigan and the particular silence that I had slowly, across that difficult winter, begun to make peace with. The silence still wasn't easy. I expect it never will be entirely. But it was no longer the silence of a stopped clock. It was something more like the silence between notes, not emptiness, but space. Daniel calls every night at 7 o'clock. Same as always. Some nights Sophie gets on the phone and updates me on her sticker collection and Gerald the magnolia tree and her ongoing complicated feelings about Marcus. Last month she informed me that she had started a new section of her collection dedicated specifically to animals of the ocean, and that she needed me to be on the lookout for a narwhal. I told her I'd keep my eyes open. I've thought a lot about what I would say to you if you asked me what I learned from all of it. I'm 72 years old now. I've taught history for 30 years, which means I've spent a career thinking about why human beings do the things they do and what we carry forward from the wreckage. Here's what I came back to, friend. I almost let the wrong lesson win. The lesson that says, don't trust people, don't accept help. Don't open the door when someone offers you kindness because you can't be certain what's in their other hand. I felt the pull of that lesson very strongly in the months after it all came out. It would have been so easy to settle into that bitterness and call it wisdom. But Sophie gave me a different lesson, without knowing she was giving me anything at all. She's 7 years old and she saw something that didn't look right, and instead of ignoring it because she didn't understand it, she came and told me. Not because she was certain, because she thought I should know. That's it. That's the whole thing. You don't need certainty to act. You need enough. You need to trust the part of yourself that says something here is not right before you can explain why. I ignored that part of myself for too long because I was more afraid of being wrong than I was protective of my own life. Don't make the same mistake. Your instincts have kept your line alive for 100,000 years. Listen to them. The people who try to take from you by making themselves appear harmless are counting on your good manners. They are counting on the part of you that doesn't want to cause a scene, doesn't want to seem ungrateful, Doesn't want to look like a suspicious old man making accusations at the dinner table. They are counting on your decency against you. Keep your decency. Just don't let anyone use it as a door they can walk through while you're looking the other way. I still have the blue dolphin sticker. Sophie pressed it against my cheek on the day I arrived, and I peeled it off carefully that night and pressed it into the back of the little notebook I keep on the nightstand. It's still there. A blue dolphin on a square of white backing, a little creased, completely ordinary. The most important thing anyone gave me all year.